story should I tell today? Guys, I got an amazing story I just found. In fact, no, I got an idea. This one. This is a good one. Let's get the SEO going. Guys, this story is gonna be epic. If you have ever asked yourself, what happens when two serial killers meet up and even possibly team up? Well, just so happens I have that answer for you today. Henry Lee Lucas and Ottis Toole met in 1976 at a soup kitchen, and they quickly became lovers, jump-starting a relationship that was based on mutual attraction and a mutual desire to kill. Both Lucas and Toole had been raised by abusive mothers who had forced their sons to dress like girls. Both had suffered sexual trauma before the age of 10, and by the time they met, both were already murderers. In fact, Lucas had already served 10 years in prison for the murder of his mother. He had killed her in 1960 when he was only 23 years old. Lucas would later tell the police, "All I remember was slapping her alongside the neck, and when I went to pick her up, I realized she was dead. Then I noticed I had a knife in my hand and that she had been cut." Lucas had long despised his mother for abusing him, and he also hated the fact that she was a sex worker and forced him to watch as she serviced customers. When he was just 10, he lost an eye because his mother ignored an infection that went on for too long. And by the time Lucas reached puberty, he channeled his rage into torturing animals and sexually assaulting his own brother. And as for Toole, his childhood was just as bad, if not worse. He was assaulted by almost every person he thought he could trust. His mother also dressed him up as a girl, and his older sister sexually assaulted him before he was even 10 years of age. And his father prostituted him to a neighbor when he was only 5 years old. So Henry Lee Lucas and Ottis Toole traveled across 26 states in the 1970s, killing whoever they met, wherever they met them. And they preyed upon anybody that they could find, which included hitchhikers, migrants, and even sex workers. For Lucas and Toole, killing was just a way that the couple could bond. And they talked about it openly, comparing notes and giving each other tips on how to kill better. Henry Lucas later claimed that he coached Toole on how to get away with murder. Lucas said he was doing his crimes all one way. I started to correct him in his ways and doing the crime where he wouldn't leave any information. But you see, Lucas and Toole did not just kill. Often, they would sexually assault and torture their victims before murdering them. And then, after their victims were dead, the couple would mutilate their bodies. Lucas later said that they didn't feel the slightest amount of guilt for their actions. He even joked that he once crossed 2 state lines with someone's severed head in his back seat. And instead of the back seat, there was somebody in the trunk. And they were knocking as hard as they could, saying, "Please, whatever you do, subscribe to this channel, help it grow." And that person was never heard from again. In all seriousness, this one's tough, guys, so I understand if you don't want to watch it, but if you do, let's continue. Now, as if that wasn't bad enough, the serial killer duo also dabbed in cannibalism. Years later, they were caught discussing cannibalism over a prison phone. Toole sounded almost nostalgic about it. He asked Lucas, "Remember how I like to pour some blood out of them and some of it tasted like real meat, you know, when it's got barbecue sauce on it?" While it may seem like the two of these men were terrifyingly made for each other, the relationship fell apart when Henry Lee Lucas became interested in Otis Toole's teenage niece, Becky Powell. Lucas later said he liked having someone look up to him, so he ran off with her and left Toole alone. Toole was so upset that he allegedly killed 9 people just to blow off some steam. But Henry Lee Lucas and Becky Powell didn't make it very far, no. While they apparently settled down on a ranch in Ringgold, Texas, the two soon got into a heated argument. In response, Lucas lured Powell to an isolated field. Then he killed her, dismembered her body, and scattered her remains. Then, Lucas lured the woman who owned the ranch out to the same field, killed her, and stuffed her body into a drainage pipe. And it was soon afterward Lucas was arrested in Texas in 1983. Now, meanwhile, Toole was separately imprisoned in Florida in 1984 for burning a 64-year-old man alive. At last, the killer couple was behind bars, but the mystery behind their murder spree had just begun. Surprisingly, Henry Lee Lucas wasn't arrested for murder. He'd been snagged up for possession of a deadly weapon, but once he was in custody, he began to talk about his murders to any police officer who would listen. And as far as Otis Toole, he was far more reluctant to talk about his crimes at first. But once he learned that Lucas was taking police officers on guided tours of their murder sites, Toole soon began backing up his former lover's claim. By his count, they'd murdered 108 people. Among the corroborated confessions, one of the most horrific cases was the monstrous killing of a 6-year-old boy by the name of Adam Walsh in Hollywood, Florida. This boy's disappearance in 1981 devastated his parents and led to a public outcry for his return. Extensive searches and manhunts took place, and the disappearance drew a lot of attention from across the country. As it later turned out, Toole abducted Adam in the parking lot of a small mall where he was with his mother. And the boy's mom had only a momentary lapse of attention as she looked through articles, and Toole used candy and toys to lure this boy away. Now, the 6-year-old kid, Adam Walsh, if it sounds familiar, is the son of future America's Most Wanted host, John Walsh. And it's argued that this is why John started America's Most Wanted to begin with. Toole insisted that he was the young boy's murderer. He even argued with the police when they doubted his claims. He told them, "Oh no, I killed him too. There's no doubt about that." And according to Toole, he had snatched the child from a Sears parking lot in 1981. Toole then took the Walsh boy to his car and drove away. It wasn't long until the boy started to feel uneasy and asked, "Can I go home?" At which point he started crying. Now, according to Toole's confession, he found the crying irritating, so he punched the boy in the face. At that point, the child then started crying even louder. At which point, Toole began savagely beating him until he lost consciousness. The killer then drove to a secluded area where he murdered the barely conscious boy by strangulation, after which he cut his head off with a machete. And then, after decapitating the young boy with a machete, Toole drove around with the head in his car for so long that he forgot it was in there. When he later remembered that it was in the car, that's when he simply tossed it out into a canal. Walsh was perhaps one of the most well-known victims killed by Toole or Lucas, since his murder would result in new child protection laws and his father getting into television and criminal justice. Meanwhile, Henry Lee Lucas readily confessed to more than 600 murders, but he had his own motivations for doing so, far beyond bringing the truth to light. He said that he made police look stupid, and he boasted about it, and he said, "I was out to wreck Texas law enforcement." And as Lucas would later admit, confessing to the crimes won him extra privileges. The police would often drive him out to the scene of the crime and even let him get fast food to eat. And in more ways than one, the police ended up encouraging false confessions, especially from Lucas. For one, the police were happy to pin as many unsolved murders as they could on Lucas, so they eagerly ate up many of his stories. In the end, Lucas was sentenced to death and died of heart failure in prison in 2001. Toole was also sentenced to death, but he died in prison of cirrhosis in 1996. Their story, while horrifying, is a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked violence and the power of twisted friendships. Now, I know that was a crazy story, so if you want something lighter to listen to right now or to watch, then please click here, here, or here. And I hope you all enjoyed that, and as of now, I will be posting every Friday and every Tuesday. So mark your calendars and turn on all for notifications. I'll see y'all later.